Runebound, the best place for live Project K gameplay. Now, let's have a look at our competitors. Stafford is playing Volibear and he will be going first, so his Sigil of the Storm was discarded. Ian is playing Victor and shows the Grand Plaza. Zach is playing Jinx and shows Zon Warrens. Then finally, we have Jameson playing Yasuo and he chose Windswept Hillock. Stafford will get us started with a physical rune and a fury rune. Then, with no actions, he will pass the turn to Ian. Ian will draw for turn, and then he will get started with a mental rune and an order rune. He will float one and recycle an order rune to play a Seal of Unity. Then he will finish up by paying 2 for a Watchful Sentry and pass the turn to me. I will draw for turn, and then I will get started with 1 Chaotic rune and 1 Fury rune. I will pay 2 for a Legion Rearguard, and then I will pass the turn to Jameson. Jameson will draw for turn, and then because he went last, he will get started with 3 Chaotic runes. He will follow that up by paying 3 for a Wielder of Water, and then he will pass the turn to Stafford. Stafford will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with a Fury rune and a Physical rune. But unfortunately for him, he does not have any cards cost 4 or less, so he will pass the turn to Ian. Ian will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with an Order rune and a Mental rune. Next, he will move his Watchful Sentry into the Grand Plaza to score the first point of the game. He will follow that up by paying 2 for a Soaring Scout, and then he will pass the turn to me. I will draw for turn, and then I will get started with 2 Fury runes. Next, I will pay 3 to hardcast a Flame Chompers. I will follow that up by moving my Legion Rearguard into the Zon Warrens, scoring me my first point. This will trigger the Zon Warrens effect when I conquer it to discard a card and draw a card. I will discard a Flame Chompers so that I may recycle a Fury rune and play the Flame Chompers into my base. And with nothing else to do, I pass the turn to Jameson. Jameson will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with a Calm rune and a Chaotic rune. Next, he will move his Wielder of Water into the Windswept Hillock to score his first point. And because Yasuo is a deck with a high amount of combat tricks, he will leave up all his runes and pass the turn to Stafford. Stafford will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with a Physical rune and a Fury rune. Finally able to play a card, Stafford pays 5 and recycles 2 Physical runes to play a Carnivorous Snapvine. He will use the Snapvine's effect to have it fight one of my Flame Chompers. He will also use his Volibear's Legend ability to ramp himself 1 rune. I have no response, so I'll let the Flame Chompers die. And with nothing else, Stafford will pass the turn to Ian. Ian will score a point for holding Grand Plaza. He will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with 2 Order runes. Next, Ian will pay 4 and exhaust his Seal of Order to play his Victor partner. He will follow that up by retreating his Watchful Sentry back to base, and then he'll pass the turn to me. I will score a point for holding Zon Warrens, draw for turn, and then I will get started with 2 Chaotic runes. Then I'll pay 2 for a Traveling Merchant, and I'll follow that up by paying 2 more for a Kimtech Enforcer, which will force me to discard a card. Next, I'll recycle one of my exhausted Fury runes to play a Seal of Fury. I'll finish up my turn by moving the Flame Chompers into the Grand Plaza to score a point and retreat the Legion Rearguard back to my base. With nothing else to do, I'll pass the turn to Jameson. Jameson will score a point for holding the Windswept Hillock. He will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with 2 Calm runes. Next, he'll pay 2 to play Meditation, exhausting his Wielder of Water to draw 2 cards. It seems Jameson may be a little light on units this game, so he'll go ahead and pass the turn to Stafford. Stafford will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with 2 Fury runes. Then he'll pay 5 and recycle 2 Physical runes to play another Carnivorous Snapvine. He will also use his Volibear's Legend ability to ramp himself another rune. He will have his Snapvine fight the Victor in Ian's base, killing it. He will follow that up by moving his first Snapvine into the Zon Warrens to score a point and allowing him to discard a card and draw a card. Finally, he'll pay 2 for a Legion Rearguard and pass the turn to Ian. Ian will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with 2 Mental runes. Then he'll pay 3 to play Faithful Manufactor, which will create a recruit in his base. Then he'll pay another 3 for another Faithful Manufactor to create another recruit in his base and pass the turn to me. I will score a point for holding the Grand Plaza, then I will draw a card for my Jinx Legend, and then I'll draw for turn. I will get started with a Chaotic rune and a Fury rune. Then I'll move my Flame Chompers back to base. It would have been smarter to do this before retreating the Flame Chompers, because this does open a showdown, even though I won't score a point, but I'm going to now move my Traveling Merchant into the Grand Plaza because I want to discard a card and draw a card. I will discard a Flame Chompers, and then I will use my Seal of Fury to pay the power to bring the Flame Chompers back onto my board. Next, I'll pay 2 to play a Legion Rearguard. And finally, because I want to have only 1 card in my hand to draw an extra card at the start of my turn, I will recycle a Chaotic rune to play a Seal of Discord. Then I'll pass the turn to Jameson. Jameson will score a point for holding the Windswept Hillock. He will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with 2 Calm runes. Then he'll pay 6 and recycle 2 Calm Runes to play his Yasuo partner. Then he'll pass the turn to Stafford. Stafford will score a point for holding these on warns, then he will draw for turn and get started with a Fury Rune and a Physical Rune. Next he'll pay 8 and recycle a Fury Rune to play a Magma Worm. He will then use his Volibear's Legend ability to ramp himself 1 rune. Next he'll move his Carnivorous Snapvine into the Grand Plaza to fight my Traveling Merchant. With nothing in my hand to save the Merchant, I will let it die and Stafford will conquer the Grand Plaza, scoring another point. And with nothing else to do, Stafford will pass the turn to Ian. Ian will draw for turn and he'll get started with 1 Mental Rune and 1 Order Rune. Next, he'll pay 2 for his Victor's Legend ability to create a Recruit. He will then pay 2 and exhaust his Seal of Unity to play a Hidden Blade and kill Stafford's Carnivorous Snapvine, which will allow Stafford to draw 2 cards. Then he'll move his Watchful Sentry into the Grand Plaza to score another point, and with nothing else to do, he'll pass the turn to me. I will draw for Jinx, then I'll draw for turn, and then I'll get started with 2 Chaotic Runes. Then I'll pay 5 and exhaust my Seal of Discord to play my Jinx partner. Next, I'll move my Flame Chompers and Legion Rearguard into the Windswept Hillock to fight Jameson's Wielder of Water. He will respond by paying 2 for a Discipline. With no combat tricks of my own, my first attempt at scoring a point this turn has been thwarted, so I will now move my Legion Rearguard into the Grand Plaza to fight Ian's Watchful Sentry. Ian will pay 1 to stupefy my Watchful Sentry because he'd like to draw and cause both of our units to die. I will then move my Flame Chompers into the Grand Plaza to finally score a point for this turn. To finish up my turn, I'll pay 2 for a Chemtech Enforcer, which will force me to discard a card. This will trigger my Purple Jinx's ability, readying it and giving it +1 might. But not wanting to possibly get it killed, I will leave it in my base and pass the turn to Jameson. Jameson will score another point for holding the Windswept Hillock, then he will draw for turn and get started with 2 Chaotic Runes. Finally, drawing some units, Jameson will pay 6 and recycle a Chaotic Rune to play a Cane. Next, he'll move his Yasuo into the Zon Warrens to fight Stafford's Carnivorous Snapvine. Yasuo will kill the Snapvine with its attacking trigger, and then Jameson will score a point. Since he conquered Zon Warrens, he will now have to discard a card and draw a card. He will finish up his turn by paying 2 and using his Yasuo's Legend ability to retreat his Yasuo back to base. He will then pass the turn to Stafford. Stafford will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with 2 Physical Runes. He will then pay 10 and recycle 2 Fury Runes to play his Volibear partner. The Volibear partner will come inactive because of the Magma Worm's effect. He will immediately follow this up by moving the Volibear into the uncontested Windswept Hillock to score himself a point. He will finish up his turn by moving his Legion Rearguard into the Zon Warrens, which he will conquer, and that will cause him to discard a card and draw a card. Then with nothing else to do, he'll pass the turn to Ian. Ian will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with an Order Rune and a Mental Rune. Next, he will move both his Faithful Manufactors into the Grand Plaza to fight my Flame Chompers. This will kill my Flame Chompers and allow him to take the Grand Plaza and score a point, but my Chompers will take one of the Manufactors with it. Ian is going to go ahead and start loading up every single thing he can onto the Grand Plaza to try and use its alternate win condition. And then with nothing else to do, he's going to pass the turn to me. Looking at the runes Ian left up, I tell the table I'm very certain that he has Grand Stratagem in hand. I will then draw for turn and get started with 2 Fury Runes. Next, I'll move my Chemtech Enforcer into the Zon Warrens to fight Stafford's Legion Rearguard. I will kill his Rearguard, scoring myself a point, and then discarding a card and drawing a card, which will trigger my Purple Jinx's ability, giving it +1 might. I will pay 2 and exhaust my Seal of Fury to play a Vi. Next, I will pay 4 and recycle 2 Fury Runes to play an accelerated Red Jinx. The Red Jinx's ability will force me to discard 2 cards, which will trigger my Purple Jinx's ability, causing it to gain 1 might. Worried about Stafford trying to win the game on his next turn, I will move my Red Jinx and Chemtech Enforcer into the Windswept Hillock to fight his Volibear. The Volibear will take my Red Jinx with it, but I will conquer the Windswept Hillock and score another point. With nothing else to do, I will pass the turn to Jameson. Jameson will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with 2 Calm Runes. Next, he will use his Yasuo's Legend ability to move his Cane into the Windswept Hillock to fight my Chemtech Enforcer. My Chemtech Enforcer will die, and Jameson will score a point. He will follow this up by playing not 1, but 2 On Guards, boosting his Cane to 10 power. Then he will have his Cane gank from the Windswept Hillock into the Grand Plaza to fight Ian's army. Ian will pay 6 and recycle 3 Order Runes to play his Grand Stratagem. Jameson will kill the Faithful Manufactor, but because Cane has moved twice and can't take damage, he will retreat to base after the battle. Having successfully forced out Ian's Grand Stratagem, Jameson will move his Wielder of Water into the Windswept Hillock, but because he's already scored this battlefield this turn, he will not score another point. Now, with nothing else to do, he'll pass the turn to Stafford. Stafford will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with 2 Fury Runes. Next, he'll pay 10 and recycle 2 Fury Runes to play another red Volibear. Once again, it is active because of the Magma Worm. This will trigger his Volibear's Legend ability, allowing him to ramp himself another rune. Just like the last Volibear, this one will immediately get moving. He'll move it right into the Grand Plaza, and its ability will kill the 5 recruits. Then the ensuing combat will kill the rest of the units there. Stafford will conquer the Grand Plaza and score himself another point. He will finish up his turn by moving the Magma Worm into the Zon Warrens, killing my Chemtech Enforcer and scoring himself another point. He will then have to discard a card and draw a card because he conquered Zon Warrens. With nothing else to do, he'll pass the turn to Ian. For some reason, Ian will start off by getting 2 Order Runes, and then he'll draw for turn. Next, he'll pay 2 and exhaust his Seal of Unity to play everyone's favorite card, Cole. I'll choose to kill my purple Jinx. Jameson will kill his Wielder of Water, and Stafford will kill his Magma Worm. Ian will follow this up by paying 6 and recycling a mental rune to play his Wraith of Echoes. Finally, he'll finish up his turn by paying 2 and using his Victor's Legend ability to create a recruit. Then he'll pass the turn to me. I'll draw for Jinx, then I'll draw for turn, and I'll get started with 2 Fury Runes. Next, I will move my Vi into the Zon Warrens, but because I'm at 7 points and cannot win the game from conquering Zon Warrens, I will draw a card instead of scoring a point. Then, because I conquered the Zon Warrens, I will discard a card and draw a card. Having to worry about both Jameson and Stafford trying to win the game on their next turns, I decide it's best to just leave all my runes up and pass the turn to Jameson. Jameson will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with a Chaotic Rune and a Calm Rune. Next, he will pay 5 for a Maddened Marauder. The Maddened Marauder's effect will force the Volibear back to Stafford's base, but Jameson will have to recycle 2 runes to pay the deflect cost for the Volibear. Now, with none of the battlefields being well defended, Jameson will start by using his Yasuo's Legend ability to move his Yasuo into the Windswept Hillock. Knowing the game will end if I don't do something about it, I will pay 8 and recycle 3 Chaotic Runes to play Possession, taking control of Jameson's Yasuo before it can score the Windswept Hillock. Unable to win the game this round, but still trying to establish a presence on the board, Jameson will pay 3 for a Last Breath, having his Marauder kill my Vi. He will finish up his turn by moving his Marauder into the Zon Warrens, scoring himself a point, and discarding a card then drawing a card. With nothing else to do, he'll pass the turn to Stafford. Stafford will draw for turn, and then he'll get started with 2 Fury Runes. Next, he will move his Volibear into the Windswept Hillock, but because he's at 7 points, he will not score a point, he will just draw a card. He will follow that up by paying 5 and recycling 2 physical runes to play an Accelerated Misfortune. He will then move the Misfortune into the Grand Plaza. Moving the Misfortune will allow it to ready the Volibear. Jameson will pay 2 and recycle 2 Chaotic Runes to play Rebuke, bouncing the red Volibear back to Stafford's hand. He will have to recycle 2 more runes to pay the deflect cost. Stafford will pay 6 and recycle a Fury Rune to play an Accelerated Blazing Scorcher. He will move the Scorcher into the Zon Warrens to fight the Maddened Marauder. This will kill the Marauder, and Stafford will win the game. It is worth noting that Stafford did forget to recycle one of his physical runes to accelerate his Misfortune, but in the end it doesn't matter, because he still had the 12 runes necessary to win the game that turn. And if you enjoyed the gameplay, feel free to subscribe for more. See you next time!